What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Dad Wise podcast. I'm Isaac, your host. We are just a group of dads seeking wisdom together, and today's podcast is packed full of wisdom from Chris Bruno. He's an author, the founder of Restoration Project and Restore Counseling, and also a marriage course and counseling that he does. And the books he's written are Sage and the Man Maker Project and the Brotherhood Primer. And I think there's a couple more, but the Man Maker Project is the one that I'm working on right now. It talks about how to call the man out of your son and to create rituals and rites of passage for your son. And then the Sage book is about how you yourself transition from being a man into being a sage. And so this conversation was packed full of wisdom. We talked marriage, parenting, fatherhood, how to raise our sons, how to deal with our own stuff so that we can bring life to our families, how to reinterpret our stories, how to understand our story better so that we can bring life to our families. So I think you guys are going to really enjoy this conversation. Let's hop into it. All right. Hey, I'm here with Chris Bruno. Thanks for being with me today, Chris.
Hey, so great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show, Isaac.
Yeah, for sure. Will you give people just kind of a background of who you are, where you are in the world, and kind of how many kids you have, and maybe grandkids too, if you've got any of those running around?
So I am in northern Colorado, in a town called Fort Collins. I grew up here in Colorado, but left to go to the Midwest for a couple years for college. And then my wife and I lived overseas for about 10 years in Istanbul, Turkey. And then we came back to the United States in 2007, lived in Seattle.
Nice.
And both of us got graduate degrees then and moved here in 2010 to Colorado. So we've been here for the last 13 years. We've been married for 28 years, and we've got 3 children. Thank you. It is an accomplishment. We've got 3 kids who are mostly adults. We've got 2 that are out of the house and 1 senior in high school still. So she's our last one. So that's kind of where we're at. No grandkids yet, but you know, we need to get them married first. So
that's a good goal. You're right on the threshold of empty nesting.
I know. I can't tell you how excited we are. It has been so many years of parenting that we're ready. We love our kids. Don't get me wrong. Like, we love our children, and we're ready for a little freedom.
Yeah. How do you think about that transition? I know you've talked about like different thresholds and milestones in your different books and stuff. How do you think about the empty nesting? What are your thoughts or your plans moving into that next season?
Well, so many thoughts and plans. First of all, we're gonna celebrate with some good friends of ours. Kind of have a victory lap trip with another couple who's right at the same stage as us. They have a senior in high school and it's their last. So we'll do that together, go on some kind of trip. But then just the openness and the freedom that we will then have to, and the crazy thing is that we're going to then go visit our children, right? Instead of them being at home, we're going to go visit them. And we've grown a family that loves to travel. And so we'll be all over the world, I think, as a result. So
I love that.
We're looking forward to it. Yeah.
And you have freedom with kind of the work that you do, that you can kind of move about the country as you like.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
As we like. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. You can go leave their lights on and stuff at their houses and leave their cupboards open.
Seriously. Yeah. I don't know how many cupboards or socks I have picked up, you know.
Yeah. So I'm right in the thick of it. Yeah, I've got 7, 5, 3, and a newborn. So we've got all sorts of socks everywhere. And so, we're a long way from empty nesting.
Yes, you are. And you're right.
We're adding to the nest.
And you know what, Isaac, like, there is something beautiful about where I'm at, but there's also something really beautiful about where you're at. The season of being that dad and being able to write some stories into the lives of your children is just amazing. I think it's a beautiful time.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your Man Maker Project book. That's the one I'm currently working through. About halfway. I've got a 7-year-old boy.
Okay, 7-year-old boy. Yeah.
7-year-old boy, 5-year-old boy, and the newborn's a boy too. So I've got a couple cracks at the man making.
At developing men, yes. Okay.
Yeah. So my first son, I always like tell him, I'm like, I'm so sorry. We're practicing on you and we don't know what we're doing. So
This is
thank you
my
for
first
being,
time. Yeah.
it's my first time. It's your first time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give us kind of like a overview of what the book is about for people who don't know and some of
Yeah.
the key
So,
concepts?
Manmaker Project is a book about how a father is designed by God to be an intentionally bring his son, usher his son from boyhood into manhood.
Yeah.
That in kind of the Western culture, we just do not have rites of passage that are written into the fabric of our society, and so I feel
Yeah.
like there's something so important, so much ancient, wisdom and culture has that, and we've really lost that. And there's something
Yeah.
significant that I feel like we need to do with our boys specifically to help them make that transition. We need to do that with our
Yeah.
girls too, but
Yeah.
it's a different process to raise, for a father in the raising of his daughter than a father in raising of his boy.
Yeah.
So the way I like to talk about it is that it's the task of the father to find the man within the boy and to call
Yeah.
him forth and to bring him
Yeah.
out. And there's all sorts of processes that I write about in Manmaker Project. A lot of times people think, oh, it's just like a ceremony when he's 12 or 13, or
Right.
it is that, and it's a lot more than that. It's more of the journey.
Yeah.
It started for me when I was right in the throes of it with my son.
Yeah.
When he was born, I was standing there in the hospital and kind of having a little bit of an oh crap moment, holding this boy, and I was like, I don't know what to do because it wasn't
Yeah.
good for me. So I don't know what
Yeah.
to do in raising this boy into a man, and so that kind of began a journey for me of doing some of my own work as a
Yeah.
man, and then kind of thinking, how am I going to prepare to usher him into manhood? So
Yeah.
that's where Manmaker Project came about.
Yeah. I love that. What is you've talked a little bit about this in your book, but like the importance of discovering, like going into your own childhood, right? Because like a lot of men weren't fathered well and
Right.
weren't brought out, right? And they weren't, man-made. They weren't. Their fathers didn't call that out of them. How do we start to unravel our story or go back into that story? How do you think about that process as we try to develop men? We have to, develop ourselves first or explore what's going on in
Yeah, I
us.
mean, I think one of the my favorite phrases is that trauma is passed down from generation to generation until someone is brave enough to feel it.
That's a great line.
Okay? And so when someone is brave enough to kind of turn towards what has been written into the brokenness of your life and of your family, and maybe it's generational, maybe it was just,
Right.
something that happened with you. When someone is brave enough to feel it and investigate it and go towards it, that's
Yeah.
when it diffuses the power of that trauma, and it doesn't pass down to the next generation. Obviously, we're all living in a broken and fallen world, and so we're not going to be perfect dads. No matter how much work we do on
Right.
ourselves, we're not going to be perfect. And we can actually transform our family trees by doing some
Yeah.
of this work. Like, I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy in the line of all of the Bruno men before me that transformed what it looks like for the generations after me. That's
Yeah.
why I say, hey, we got to start with ourselves.
Right.
Because I mean, however you want the phrase to go, broken men break men,
Right.
traumatized men. Like there's so much that we could pass down. One of my
Yeah.
favorite authors, he says that we are heaps of undigested experience. We have all this experience living inside of us that we've not spent the
Yeah.
time investigating or digesting, and as long as that sits there, it's like this sinking feeling that you have in your soul that you just can't get out of. And I think really some of the deepest work of fathering is to do your own work so
Yeah.
that you don't transfer it to the next generation. It doesn't leak out on
Yeah.
the next generation after you.
What are some of the ways that you would encourage, or that you do encourage men, you work with men all the time, to digest their experiences? How does a man go about doing that, especially one who's probably not so connected with themselves? How do we start that journey?
Yeah. Well, so I would say get connected with men that are doing this. If you don't know how to
Hmm.
do this, find some that are. Look in your community, look in your church, look at work. Are there some guys around you that have kind of the sense of gravitas to them, some sense
Hmm.
of depth to them that you're like, oh, I want to be like him. And
Yeah.
and even if it's not like he, like I said, we're never done. It's not going to ever be perfect, but there's just
Yeah.
something about another man that can be with you in that process. So that would be first.
Yeah.
Second, it would be find some kind of groups or organizations that do this kind of thing,
Yeah.
and just promoting my own organization,
Do it.
Restoration Project, which Isaac, you've been involved with Restoration
Yeah.
Project, is this is what we do. We
Hmm.
want to see, our vision is to see a world of transformed men,
Yeah.
and it's a Christian ministry that focuses on this, but we help guys take those steps into their stories and into
Yeah.
doing that work with other men too. So whether it's through our books or experiences that we run or retreats that we have or online platform, courses and all the stuff that we have, there are
Yeah.
ways for you to start doing that. The other thing I would say is just like you, like start to read.
Yeah.
Guys don't read very much, right? Just we don't have time to read and whatever,
Yeah.
but start to read. And if it's just like 2 or 3 pages a day,
Yeah.
and there are so many great books out there for us to read that will lead us down the pathway of really investigating our own stories. And then
Yeah.
the last thing I'll say, and it's not the last thing I could say, but last thing I will say right now, um, the more like we have been given the gift of reflection.
Hmm.
No other creature on earth has the gift of reflection. And so just for us to sit in, whether it's
Yeah.
think, pray, talk, journal, whatever it is, to reflect on your life and
Yeah.
just ask yourself, like, what's going on here? What's going on in the story of my life? That would be the first kind of step into those waters.
Yeah. It's so hard to like just sit without any distractions these days. Yeah.
It is.
To reflect. Yeah. What are some of those books that you'd recommend? I usually ask at the end, but I'll ask now since you brought it up. I love reading, and with audiobooks now, and there's no excuse not to be listening to a book on the way to work or while you work out or whatever. But
Yeah, or
what are some
something.
of your top for on this topic as far as like exploring your own story?
Exploring our story. Okay, so I'll mention Becoming a King by
Yeah.
Morgan Snyder. I'll mention a book called Healing Path by Dan
Okay.
Allender. Another one called The Soul of Shame
Hmm.
by a man named Kurt Thompson.
Okay.
Okay. I
I
think,
haven't read that one.
okay. I think, I mean, there's many of them by Brene Brown. I think
Okay.
would be good ones for people.
Yeah.
You mentioned Man Maker Project. That
Yeah.
is, my book.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty good. I don't
You
know.
like it? Yeah.
I like it. And then I actually just came out with another book called Sage.
Yeah.
That is about the second half of a man's life. And
Yeah.
this is something, I know that we're talking to dads that are often have young kids still at home. They're not even thinking
Yeah.
about the second half of life and what that looks like. We just talked about empty nesting.
Yeah.
But I really find that the more intentional you can be in your 30s
Hmm.
around who you are becoming and where you are going, the kind of easier the road is as you make those transitions into your 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
So Sage is really about that invitation to do that work as well. So
Yeah. Love that. Will you tell us? I want to talk about Sage also, but will you
oh,
tell
sure.
us kind of like what to look forward to as you are becoming a Sage? What's that transition look like? And I mean, how can I'm 31, so how can I prepare for sagehood? Or because not everyone becomes a sage, right? Some people just get old, and they
Yes.
don't gain any wisdom and have nothing to pass on. But how can a younger man be building towards that as they're thinking about that?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is just to recognize that it is actually another season. I feel like so much of, we think about the seasons of a man's life, and really
Yeah.
it's like three main seasons: boyhood,
Yeah.
manhood, and old man. And and even that, like manhood, you think about it, you become a man and you're just a man for the rest of your life. The reality is you're a man for a season and then you're designed to become a sage. You actually
Hmm.
embody a different, a different presence in the world.
Yeah.
Just the first thing would be like, yeah, there is another season. There is another step. There is another stage.
Yeah.
And it has very little to do with retirement. It has so much more to do with who you are on the inside than what is happening on the outside. Uh,
Yeah.
so, so that piece, the way that I talk about man maker and sage kind of together
Yeah.
is that I just mentioned, like the task of the first passage in a man's life is for the father to find the man within the boy and to call
Yeah.
him forth. The task of the second passage into sage, the task of the second passage is for the man, is for you. It's not your dad doing
Yeah.
this for you anymore, but it's for the
Yeah.
man to find the boy within the man and to bring him
Yeah.
home and to
Hmm.
bring him home. So there's something about coming home to yourself that I think a sage, that journey is about. So to be
Yeah.
settled, to have a sense of connectedness to your own life and story, to have a sense of uh, not settled like you're settling down into your house, but settled into your own
Yeah.
soul. Your soul feels at home inside you,
Hmm.
um, in that way. So when we have sages like that, again, we don't have
Yeah.
rites of passage in our society. We don't have sages really in our
Yeah.
societies. We just have a bunch of retirees that kind of disappear in many ways. And
Yeah.
I am not against golf and cruises, but that is not what I'm looking forward to in my life as a sage. I want to be present and engaged and involved. And yes, I want to go on trips and play golf and do some of that stuff too, but that's
Yeah.
not that's not what I'm living for as a sage. I'm living to bring the fullness of the presence that God designed for me to have inside of me.
Yeah. What are some of like the characteristics you've mentioned a little bit about it, but like what
Mm.
is a sage? Like your definition of a sage? What are they doing, being,
Oh,
acting like?
yeah. So, and each of these would have a chapter in the book. So one
Right.
is right. There is a settled contentment that happens
Yeah.
inside of the sage, where he feels that settledness. He's content with who he is. He's content with where he is, what he has been, what he's done. There's a settle. There's not this like have to fight the next battle, conquer the next hill.
Yeah.
Accomplish the next thing. He might still be actively engaged in doing those kinds of things, but his identity is not hitched to those things anymore. It has a lot
Hmm.
more. He's more settled in his own self.
Yeah.
There's a level of what I call generous spirituality,
Hmm.
where he's able and willing to sit in the both and
Hmm.
of a spirituality that doesn't have to have this like severe black and white, us and them, right and wrong. He's able to
Yeah.
sit in the space of like, I, truth still exists, and it is a lot larger territory than I first imagined it would be.
Right.
And I feel like that's what we have. We have a lot of black and white in our world, and I feel like
Yeah.
the more it's not a giving up of the convictions. It's just
Right.
allowing for there to be some more spaciousness around me, to
Yeah.
where I am more concerned about being with you and in relationship with you and bringing love to you than I am concerned about what you're thinking or believing. To having a
Right.
general spirituality.
Yeah. I
I
love that.
think something about hospitality as well.
Hmm.
This idea that I can welcome you in, and I don't mean hospitality into your house necessarily. Yes, that,
Yeah.
and far more a hospitality of you're welcome here. Come sit. Let us be. I don't have to prove anything to you anymore. I can
Yeah.
just be in your presence as I sit here. You feel like you're welcome. There's not this like pissing match happening anymore between guys. That I have
Yeah.
to prove myself. You're welcome in
Love
this
that.
space. I think something else. I'm not going to go through them all, but something else. Just like I'm familiar with suffering.
Yeah.
I've actually engaged suffering. And instead of resisting suffering, I've actually found that suffering is what helps us, back to the word digesting our experience, right?
Yeah.
Suffering is, and grieving and celebrating, two sides of the same coin, are actually part of what it means to suffer well.
Yeah.
So suffering is all throughout our lives and all throughout the
Yeah.
world. Can we suffer well? Do we know how to engage that and grieve well and then celebrate well because we've grieved well? Those are the kinds of things I think are characteristics of a sage.
Yeah, I love that. How would you say in the suffering well, what's the contrast between just suffering and suffering well? Because you can suffer and become bitter, or you can
Yeah.
suffer and become wise. How does
Yeah.
someone who becomes wise from suffering engage with that?
Oh, such a great question. I'll put it into like a dichotomy and just speak about the spectrum between the two ends.
Cool.
One of them is, suffering and becoming bitter, just like you said, this sense of everyone's against me, no one is with me, this always
Yeah.
sucks, I hate my life, like that kind of stuff. This sense of like wallowing in the
Yeah.
suffering, that's not gonna result in something good for you or for your life.
Yeah.
On the other side of the spectrum is what I would say is denial.
Yeah.
That
Huh.
that I'm just gonna I'm shut off, kind of cut out this part of my
Yeah.
life. I'm
Don't
gonna
feel it.
forget that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna
Hmm.
feel it, or I'm gonna redouble my efforts to kind of power up even more over this and become a
Hmm.
better man because they're just like that hoorah kind of feel.
Yeah.
Those two, the wallowing or that powering up, that's not suffering well.
Hmm.
Suffering well is turning towards the suffering, asking it what it would like you to learn, helping you have a sense of what have you lost, and
Yeah.
if you lose something, it must mean something to you, right?
Hmm.
And if you lose something of value, you want it back. You're
Right.
grieving the loss of it, and so
Yeah.
what was that? What did it mean to you? How did that become something that meant something to you? And turn towards suffering and really kind of, like I said, ask it what it would like you to learn, and
Yeah.
then actually feeling it.
Yeah.
Feeling it.
That's hard.
It's hard. It is.
We're not trained for feeling. Yeah.
No, no, we're not. Boys don't cry. So why would we actually turn towards our feelings except for, the fact that they're so much a part of who we are.
Right.
And if we don't turn towards our feelings, they will turn against us.
Hmm.
And so I feel like some of the suffering is turning towards it.
Yeah. I love that. What has been like, what's the transition like from regular manhood to sagehood? I'm sure it's a mess. It's not like a straight line in the sand that you just cross over, but what has it been like for you? Do you consider yourself into the sage a category yet in
I
transition?
I feel like I have just passed the threshold. So,
Awesome.
yeah, just past the threshold. I'm not in it by any stage, any sense of the imagination. It's just like I'm in the territory.
Yeah.
Um, and so much more to go. The transition to me feels like, as those characteristics I talked about
Yeah.
kind of settle into you, like, all right, here's where I actually get to be the fullness of who I was designed to be. And
Hmm.
that's now my primary focus of life. It's no longer, I'm no longer needing to do all the things that you're needing to do to raise your
Yeah.
family, or the career side of things feels like the uphill climb has been had, and now
Hmm.
I'm kind of at a space where I can continue moving in the direction that I've gotten myself to in
Yeah.
career. Those kinds of things. Relationships feel like they're at a place of still needing tending and still needing
Right.
a lot of work, but they don't feel as tenuous or fragile as they did before.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that feels like, okay, I'm starting to head into this sense of being a sage, and then I'll also say, like, the sage doesn't have to be the biggest man in the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be one of the primary kind of indicators of, like, I'm okay. And it's, I'm okay. I don't
No
have
need to
to
be the
jump.
center of attention, huh?
And then there's the people that, are the extroverts and all that are the center of attention. I'm not speaking about that,
Sure.
but they may still enjoy that, but there's not that compelling I have to be.
Hmm.
It's just like back to that settled contentment. I can be, but I don't have to be.
Yeah.
I
I
can
love that.
be here and be fully present, but I don't have to be.
Hmm.
So that feels like some of that as
I
well.
love that. Are there any like archetypal sages that you look to? I always just think of like Gandalf. But are there other like good like stories that have depicted a sage that you like? I haven't read your book yet, but I don't know if you've mentioned that
Yeah, I
in
mean,
that.
the fact is, sages are all over our stories. They're all over our stories.
Yeah.
Gandalf for sure is a
Yeah.
quintessential sage, probably the
Yeah.
most epic of all sages. Yoda,
Hmm.
another one.
Yeah.
Eventually, Luke Skywalker. Um, so he had a long journey that he had to
Ups
walk,
and downs.
um,
Yeah.
ups and downs. But then, just I mean, Dumbledore. I mean, it's just they're all
Hmm.
sages are all over the place in
Yeah.
how they do things. And if you kind of look into biblical literature,
Hmm.
there's sages there. If you look into historical literature, they're everywhere. My
Yeah.
favorite comes from a fictional uh, 5-part book series that I read when I
Okay.
was started reading when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
Uh, and I've read them and then read them again and read them again. I read them about
Yeah.
once a year. So there's a sage in there that I just love.
What's it called?
Oh, that
Or
book series is called it's written by a guy named Stephen Lawhead, and it's called
okay.
the Pendragon Cycle.
Okay.
So there's 5 books. It's all about like Arthur and Merlin and that whole
Yeah.
time period and all of that. I read them when I was started reading them when I was 16, and Merlin is the one that has actually been the greatest sage for me
The
in my
sage.
life. Yeah.
What are some of his characteristics that you love so much? Why is he your favorite sage?
Oh, well, the book series really is about him and his life,
Okay.
and it kind of demystifies him in some ways. He's not like the magic magician that everybody kind of,
Hmm.
thinks of. He was actually what's called a bard, and a
Hmm.
bard was trained in several different things. One was like listening to the land and where medicines were found and
Hmm.
how to bring healing. They were trained in music and storytelling. So the bard would
Yeah.
be the one in the king's chamber that would sing the stories of the people over the people to both remind them of where they were and where they were going and kind of give courage for the battle tomorrow, like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Um, so Merlin himself was a king at one point, and
Okay.
then kind of stepped out and underneath King Arthur to become the counsel for the king. So there are
Okay.
places there that I just love, and then there's little mysticism in there. There's little magic that
Of
happens in
course, it
these
has to be.
books. So there has to be, but just like Gandalf and Yoda and all that, and
Right?
Dumbledore, they all have some level of like,
Yeah.
fantasy and whatever. So I love that too.
I love that. Will you talk about what it kind of looked like for you to explore your story? I'm kind of going back to earlier when we talked about,
Sure.
hurt men, and exploring your own story. What did that look like for you? Because I know story is a big thread that when I did the Grove, we explored story a lot. So how did that play out for you in your life?
Yeah, well, I mentioned that I was standing in that hospital room holding my son, and he was my firstborn, and I was not ready for that. I was not ready to step into becoming a father, being a father, fathering, all that stuff. So that really opened the door to some of the places of my own life where I was unfathered,
Yeah.
underfathered, not fathered, and just had to kind of take some inventory, if you will, of what
Yeah.
that was like. Back then, John Eldridge and Wild at Heart had
Yeah.
just come out, and so it was new territory for me to start to read that. And I mentioned that I lived overseas. I was leading a ministry, and we had people that were coming over for a week, a summer, a year, 2 years. We were the long termers,
Okay.
and there were people that were coming to join our team for
Yeah.
various levels. And so many of the people that came for the year or 2 year, they were recent graduates from college.
Yeah.
And then I was kind of in charge of leading the men. And so this was their first step into adulthood.
Yeah.
And as they were trying to like wrestle through who they were as young men, young adults, they were looking to me, and I was like, I don't know how to do this either. And I'm down the road a little bit from you, but I don't know how to do this either. So
Yeah.
I had to do a lot through, and we were overseas, and this was at a time, at the time before, audiobooks and internet and all that kind of stuff was
Yeah.
really available. And so I had to just have people bring books over to me and read them. So,
That's
so my
awesome.
journey was really through reading. It was through
Yeah.
some really significant authors that invited me to consider my own story. And then when we came back to the States, I knew that I wanted to retool and retrain for the next season of my life and ministry
Yeah.
and career. And that's where I got a counseling degree. And it was
Okay.
through the counseling program. I knew exactly what school I was going to go to, and it was only to that school, and it was in
Yeah.
Seattle because of the program, because of how they engaged story,
Yeah.
because I knew that that was something had become important to me, and
Yeah.
I wanted to learn how to do that. So it was through that counseling program then that I was wrecked. I was just
Yeah.
wrecked through what they were inviting us to consider, how they were inviting us to be, the postures they were inviting us to. And then it was from that I met Greg Daly, who is the co-founder of Restoration Project, and he
Okay.
was the pastor, and I was, he was also passionate about these things. So what I was learning in the classroom, I had the laboratory for in the church.
That's
And
awesome.
so
Yeah.
we kind of started doing some of that work for ourselves and then with some other guys. And that was really the genesis of Restoration Project.
I love it. And is that Allender Institute up in Seattle, or what is it
Yeah,
called?
it's
Allender
called
School.
the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology.
Okay. Awesome. Cool. So how do you encourage men to revisit their stories? Do they like retell it in a new way or just revisit it? I know in the Grove we all brought like a token of some kind from our childhood, and then we told the story of it and then kind of unpacked that. Will you kind of explain that process?
Sure. So our bodies hold our stories in memory, right? So we remember what has happened, but we can't do anything with our memories. We can't change them. We can't, work with our memories until they are told. So a story is a memory that is brought out into the in-between of at least two people. I get to tell you my story, and now it becomes something that's out in the in-between, and we get to think
Yeah.
about it, wonder about it, ask about it, explore the story more. And
Yeah.
it's not that just like here are the events of what happened.
Right.
The story is, what did you feel about those events?
Right.
And then what did you come to believe about what you felt about
Yeah.
those events? That's the actual story. So as
Yeah.
you're engaging in some storytelling with someone else, and whether that's in a small group or with a counselor or a coach or a friend or a pastor, like as you're telling the story, and as someone is actually sitting with you in that story, that's where you get to wonder, like, what is the actual truth of what went on for me here?
Yeah.
Because the events, you can't go back and change the events. You
Yeah.
can't go back and change your emotions about those events. But what you can do is some kind of tweaking, unraveling about what you came to believe about yourself, others, the world, God, whatever it is, that what you came to believe as a result of those things. And kind of what I mean is, our stories, especially our stories of harm, all
Yeah.
have embedded in them interpretations about beliefs about ourselves in the world. So it sounds like, no one is coming for me.
Right.
I will always be alone.
Yeah.
I will never measure up. There's something wrong with me.
Right.
I'm just a pervert. Like whatever those narratives are that sit there at the level of story, that didn't come
Right.
there because the event or the emotion happened. It came as a result of what you believed about yourself,
Interpretation. Yeah.
the interpretation you came to. And so when you can explore your story with another person, and they begin to kindly wonder with you
Yeah.
what was actually happening right there for you in that story, you can slowly begin to kind of unravel and unpack that narrative in a different way.
Yeah, I remember one of the key like aspects of the Grove experience was curiosity about the story. So like when someone tells their story, you just ask questions and you're curious about them or about their story and let them kind of, as you're curious, they kind of unpack it themselves. And that's an awesome strategy. I don't know if that's a counseling strategy or what, but it's a great
Yeah.
way to allow someone to kind of walk through their story on their own.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the reality is, Isaac, like if I say the word stupid and you say the word stupid, it's going to mean something different to you because of the story around stupid that I hold versus the story
Hmm.
that you hold. And
Yeah.
so the actual meaning it is what's important as I'm telling my stupid story,
Yeah.
right? It's what it how does it live inside of me? And
Yeah.
your curiosity around it is not tell me more about the content of the story, but tell me more what we talk about as the context of the story. What did that feel
Yeah.
like to you? And you're not making conclusions as the story listener with your curiosity. You're just inviting. So tell me more about that. What did that feel like to you? Where did you go with
Yeah.
that? Kinds of things, because we all have our different perspectives on,
Yeah.
what each of those stories may mean,
Yeah.
and it's important for us to unpack it for us.
Yeah. I love that because it's different than just like positive thinking or pretending it's all okay. Like it's fine, nothing, like I'm okay. I'll just think happy thoughts, right? And it's not lying to yourself about what
Right,
happened. It's not denial, and it's not like just a masquerade of pretend fake it till you make it.
right,
It's diving into it and then changing the things you can change, which would be your interpretation and uh, the truth, like because people build their lives on those truth statements that aren't
we
true, right? Like I'm a loser, or I'm always going to be alone, or I need to fend for myself, or
yes.
whatever those lies are that people that get embedded. So you can
and
unpack those, and that's an
and
honest thing to do.
they don't
Yeah.
actually, I mean, they work for a while, right? Those strategies work for a while until
Right.
they stop working. And then you're kind of left with like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So and you're right, like there is we're not going to convince ourselves of a new way of being or convince ourselves of a new interpretation.
Yeah.
The way that I like to talk about it is that tragic things happen in the world. Those tragedies, when there is a lack of kindness in the moment of those tragedies,
Yeah.
that's where those tragedies transform into traumas, soul
Hmm.
shaping, life shaping, interpretation forming traumas.
Hmm.
And those traumas are what live inside of us until there is kindness that is brought back to those traumas, revisited
Yeah.
from someone else, from you towards yourself, and from someone else towards you.
Yeah.
That then begins to unpack and unravel the trauma, the power of it, kind of diffusing, as I said, the power of that so that it can become, it's not ever going to erase it,
Yeah.
but it becomes less powerful. It goes, transforms back from trauma into a tragedy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the power over
Hmm.
you any longer. And
Yeah.
the key there is kindness. The key there is not, uh, let me just have you read this or
Straighten
convince
you
you
out.
this,
Yeah.
or positive thinking, straighten you
Yeah.
out. You just need to change your thinking. That doesn't actually help. No, it's kindness. The
Hmm.
kindness of another person and
Yeah.
you towards yourself that actually transforms our lives.
Yeah. That's awesome because you can do that anywhere at in any relationship at any coffee. It doesn't have to be a sit down intense, counseling session. It can be, but
Yeah.
as men, we can just think of like, how can I be curious about this person's story and how can I bring kindness to it? And that's just every day. Like that's great parenting. That's great relationship advice for husbands and wives. Yeah.
For anywhere, yeah. And another resource we have at Restoration Project is called the Brotherhood Primer, and it
Yeah.
is all about specifically helping train us men on how to have that kind of presence, that kind of kindness in the context of our relationships.
Yeah.
It develops brotherhood amongst us, and not just a bunch of buddies that sit around the grill, watching the game with a
Talking about
beer in
football.
hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that could be, there's value there, right?
Yeah.
Just like I said a little while ago, I'm not against cruises and golf. I'm not against games and beer, but the thing is like that's not actually the grit of where real relationship is found.
Yeah. How is this? I'm curious about I was just going to ask you like marriage advice in general, but how is this concept of exploring story? Have you, because you talk about men doing it, like that's the
Yep.
Grove and Restoration Project. How have you done this with your wife, and how much do you recommend men do this with their wives, or should they go out on a solo adventure and come back? Like is it a mountaintop thing, or how
Oh,
does this
well, I
play
think
out?
it's that's so great. I think it's both of the things, right? Yes, go on the mountaintop. Yes, get with your buddies and do this with other men. But yes, 100%. The marriage work that I do in something that we've developed called the Thrive Marriage Lab
Yeah,
is actually helping couples explore their stories so that their intimacy, their connection, their presence to one another can take a different level, can go to a different level.
yeah,
So 100%, it is a different posture that if we can take with our wives, it transforms how things are in your
yeah.
marriage.
What would you tell me? I'm a 30-year-old man. I'm married 9 years now. What are some of the key lessons you've learned from marriage, just kind of in general? You said 27 years you've been married?
Yeah,
So
28. Yep.
28? So
Through pain.
how can a man build a strong, healthy marriage that will last a lifetime?
Oh, how much time do we have? How
We
much
have
time
20
do we
minutes
have?
left.
Oh, it's so uh I think I would say this. Go first. Okay? Go first. Don't make her go first. Go first in this work. Go first in exploring your life. Go first
Yeah.
in recognizing that you have some brokenness that you bring to the marriage. That's not her fault. She might be kind of brushing up against some of the burrs, the daggers that have kind of been put into your life from those tragedies of your life. She
Yeah.
might be brushing up against them, but it's not. She didn't put them there, and
Right.
so like. Yes, every time if there's a dagger in your heart and she brushes up against it, it's going to cause pain, but it's not her fault. So go
Yeah.
first to recognize what are some of the things in your life that need to be attended to, and attend to them and do that hard work. And then secondly, like let's not forget that marriage was designed for connection and delight.
Hmm.
Connection and delight. It was not designed to make sure you have the best house or the best career, the best car, like all those kinds of things. If there is connection that you can find with one another, then that is really what you should be shooting for. And I say
Yeah.
that because men will focus on the provision, on the career, on the bank account, on all those, and think they're being good husbands.
Right.
That's not husbanding. Okay? That's
Yeah.
adulting.
Yeah.
Husbanding is actually turning yourself towards her in a way that is both humble and present and kind, and I want to like land on the word present.
Hmm.
Provision is not husbanding. A house over your head is not husbanding. Those are good things that the two of you can work towards to create a home.
Yeah.
But husbanding is actually being that kind, generous, strong, tender presence
That's so
to
good.
her in a way that no one else on earth can.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, if you think about like the root of husbandry, animal husbandry, there's no, you're attentive to your animals, right? You're there, you're watching them, you're with them. There is some provision involved, but
Yeah,
you think about the shepherds on the
it's
mountains. You're just
it's
there,
not it's not the
paying
main
attention.
thing. It's one of the things, provision, but it's not the main thing. The
Yeah,
the most important thing I think in husbanding is presence. Are
yeah,
you present? And if you're not, what is keeping you from being present?
yeah,
And that has far more to do with your story than hers.
yeah. What do you think are some of like the biggest roadblocks for presence? I know like the iPhone is definitely an easy scapegoat, but I'm sure there's more.
Yeah. Well, I'll take the iPhone and I'll raise you one, and that
Yeah.
is that the iPhone has become our greatest dissociative tool
Hmm.
to dissociate. So, roadblocks, I would say yes, the iPhone is one, but the iPhone is one. Football is another. busyness is another, career is another, anything that dissociates us from being there, from associating. I mean, the opposite of dissociation is association. So
Yeah.
the iPhone is one. I think another narrative that gets played out in so many men's lives is like, I have to be somebody.
Yeah.
And I have to be somebody in my job. I have to be somebody in my neighborhood. I have to be somebody in my career. I have to be somebody in my church, whatever it is. I have to be somebody. And so there's all this energy that is aimed in a man's life towards becoming something, when I think what would happen in men's lives if we just like settle down and go and kind of wonder, like, who am I versus who do I have to become?
Right.
Who am I? And how do I be that guy?
Yeah.
And spend my energy there.
Yeah.
So I think some of the roadblock is, you bring up roadblocks to being present is trying to go like do something, become something somewhere else, when in fact, like, I don't think she actually needs you to do all that.
Right.
I think she actually just needs you to like show up.
Right. Yeah. She doesn't care if you're famous or rich or you're famous to your kids. So be the hero to them. Yeah.
Famous to them and to her. Like, that is your primary focus.
I love that. I want to circle back around to where we started with the Man Maker project, with my 7-year-old and 3-year-old and 7-week-old. How do I start building towards that, and when do you kind of make that like official? Like, I'm doing it now. Like, I'm starting the process.
Yeah. So, as we talked about earlier, the beginning years of your son's life, what he needs most from you is that sense of presence.
There he is, right here. You want to say hi, Leo?
Hi.
Hi.
This is Chris. I don't think you can hear him in my headphones. We were just talking about how to raise sons. So here we are. All right, head down. I'll be down in a few minutes.
Okay.
You eating lunch?
Ready.
Okay, thank you. All right, where were we?
His name is Leo.
Leo, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I would say the thing that most that your boy needs from you is your presence and your delight.
Yeah.
Okay, and your delight. He just needs to play with you, and I think that the "Daddy, will you come play with me?" question is important for us to answer with a yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So during that time that he's that age, it's mostly about you. Do your work. Okay.
Yeah.
And when puberty starts to hit,
it's
really when he's a new beast in all the ways, right? So that is when you want to be really ready to have a journey planned out for him. It is far less about what, and it is more about that, not what you do, but that you do something.
Right.
So have thoughtful, intentional, a journey planned out for him of what that's going to look like for him over the course of, I like to think about it as a journey of about a year. And that involves other men, involves you as a dad, involves other men, in that kind of ends with some kind of celebration and test, really. Because I think different, we don't have time to go into it, but I think our ultimately what our boys need from us is our heat, and what our girls need from us is our warmth.
And I love that.
And so there is a testing process, I think, that your boy will need to, because he will. All of us men, I think, ask the question, like, am I a man? And he will be asking that question for the rest of his life, unless and until dad answers that.
Yeah.
Yes, you are a man. I hereby, in the company of men, deem you a man. Now you get to sit at the table of men. And when he turns 13 years old, that doesn't actually happen. He's got a lot to do before he's actually a man. But at least he can sit at the table of men. And if he starts to believe that he is a man, then he will become that man. So that 12, 13-year-old time frame is really important. And with Restoration Project, we have experiences for dads of younger kids. Like, Leo, next summer, he would be, or The youngest for boys is 8 years old.
Awesome. Yeah.
To come experience some of that fun and play with
Yeah.
dad. The weekend is more about you, though, the dad.
Right.
It's about the boy.
Are those
The
all in
older,
Colorado, or where can I find
no.
one of those?
There's one in California.
Okay.
There's one in Utah. There's one, Wyoming. They're all over the place.
Yeah. What do you call those? Where can we find more
Yeah,
about that?
those are called expeditions, Restoration
Okay.
Project expeditions. So they're on the Restoration Project link,
Cool.
restorationproject.net, and then you'll
Awesome.
just find the experiences. You can
Yeah.
see all the ones. We have them for different ages of kids, young
Okay.
kids, older kids. We take you and your son or daughter out into the backcountry.
Nice.
We just did our first older kid one where we took them internationally in
Oh,
order
fun.
to prepare them to launch out into the world as a global
That's awesome.
citizen. So all that stuff is, but you don't have to come to one of our things. Come, please come. But you don't have to. You can
Yeah.
really craft some of those things yourself.
I love that. What's the importance of, I know a lot of your work is done outside, like in nature. How does that play into just the environment of this? I know I read the parts of when you're taking your son on some of these journeys, they're outside, you're challenging
Yeah.
yourself, you're kind of coming up against nature and seeing if you can conquer it or not. How does nature kind
Yeah.
of play into this?
I think there's two things that I would say to that, Isaac, and one is it is really, really important for all of us, adult men and men in the process, to recognize how actually small and vulnerable we are. And there is nothing more bigger in the world than being out and facing like the extremes.
Yeah.
So there is something about the wilderness that just makes us recognize like how vulnerable we are.
Yeah.
So there is something about that. But then back to your, iPhone dissociation kind of conversation we
Yeah.
were having just a minute ago. Like when you're out in the wilderness, you are associated.
Yeah.
There is nothing else to do but be present to your son or
Right.
present to your daughter. That's why you're here. So we use the wilderness as kind of stripping away of all those other, comforts and accoutrements that we are used to.
Yeah.
That just so that we can be fully present.
I love that. What do you kind of do on a retreat, or what did you call them? The father son adventures.
The adventures, yeah.
What could I expect if I bring my son out there?
Okay, so for your age of son, we're not doing anything like major backpacking or hiking or anything like that, but we do bring you outside. It's a weekend of experience of where you're camping. Every dad and child, every dad and son or dad and daughter have their you have your own tent, you have
Awesome.
your own space. So
Yeah.
there is that kind of camping. But then we have loads of fun activities that we are organizing for you, silly things that you're doing, just play, full on play
Yeah.
with your son or daughter. We've got all the campfire and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
BB guns and target shooting, all those kinds of typical kinds of camp things. But on that weekend, we also we will take the sons away from you for a morning, so that then you get to, in the company of other dads, be able to start to tell your story, start to explore some of where you've been. What was your fathering like? How have you been
Yeah.
wounded? What story was written for you, and what story are you writing as a father? So help you explore some of those things.
Yeah.
As well, and just introduce some of the categories that we open up in the Manmaker Project book for sons. And then we have a whole other thing for girls too. So it's a outdoor fun, crazy, high
Love it.
energy kind of experience that is also really sweet and intimate, with moments for just the two of you.
I love that.
In your own space. The older kids, we do a backpacking. So it's always fathers and whatever age their child is. So
Yeah.
older kids will go backpacking. We have a canoe trip for boys, canoe trip for
Awesome.
girls, and their dads, right? So those are the kinds of things that we run.
I love it. What's the
Yeah.
importance of blessing? I know you've talked about that in your book. How do you think about that in a couple minutes? We're almost out of time, but I wanted to talk about
that's
blessing.
okay. It's blessing. I'll speak about it this way. I think our female counterparts, women, have this beautiful co-creation aspect of what it means for her to bring life into the world,
Yeah.
just by the nature. I mean, you just experienced this by the nature of her body bringing forth life that we men do not have.
Yeah.
That participation in the knitting together of a life, and then nurturing from her body even after birth, like the
Right.
nurturing of that sustenance for that little infant is all part of that co-creation that she has with the child. We don't have that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think we are gifted with the power of our words.
Mm-hmm.
The power of our words. Our words can either bring life or they can bring death. They can bring life when they are spoken in blessing. They can
Yeah.
bring death either in the absence of those words or in the harshness
Yeah.
of those words. And so if we want to bring life in our world and our children, then we have the opportunity to speak life words into them.
Yeah.
And far more I could say about blessing, but that's really kind of why I think it's so important, because just as she co-creates and brings forth life in that way, I think we co-create and bring forth life with our words.
With our words. Right. And if you believe God created with words, then there's nothing more powerful than that.
Well, and I think that participation is our words are participating with his.
Yeah. And you talk about like there's an official blessing, right? But you can be blessing all day long, every day as a father, right? You don't just save it for the ceremony.
For sure. And it's important
Yeah.
in that kind of ceremony, because
Yeah.
I think I would love to see a generation of men where there is a generation of children after us that none of them would be able to say, I never heard that from my dad. I
Yeah.
never heard what he thought about me.
I love that. Were there any like favorite rituals that you found in different cultures in your research about this?
Oh,
Maybe that's
there-
first. Are those in the book?
Okay.
Read the book.
I think most of the rituals that I found were actually pretty brutal.
Yeah.
That would be illegal today. So, but it goes back to like, how can we bring our heat? That's what they were going after,
Yeah.
was the ritual to try to prove, where the boy has to prove himself as a man by walking through some of these really brutal kind of rituals. So I don't know that I would say I have a favorite one.
Not one you want to
but,
implement. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that. We would not want to
Yeah.
implement that. Blessing.
I love it.
Blessing is a great ritual.
I love it. Do you have? I like to ask everyone what they're reading. What's on your nightstand right now?
Yeah, I am reading a book by a guy named Daniel Taylor,
Okay.
and the book is called "Creating a Spiritual Legacy,"
Okay.
and through storytelling. So, how do we actually help shape the way of understanding life through the stories that we share, for legacy to be passed on to generations after us? So that's what I'm currently reading.
That's what you're currently reading. I love it. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for hopping on today. We're out of time, but this is all such great stuff. Where can people connect with you and follow along with all of this? You said restorationproject.net. Where
Yes.
else are you in the
Yeah,
internet world?
restorationproject.net. You can also find in the world of counseling, which is a whole other thing we didn't talk much about, restory.life, RESTORY.life. That's our counseling center where we do work with people all across the country in the space of story work and counseling. So, and we did mention marriage stuff. ThriveMarriageLab.com. ThriveMarriageLab.com is a place where you can find some of that marriage work.
Cool. I love it. Are you on social media at all, or you stay off that?
Well, I'll put it this way. We are on social media. I am not. So
Good.
yes.
That's probably healthy. Awesome. Well, thanks for hopping on today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, great to be with you. Thank you.